Tensions are up in the House and across the political spectrum. I mean, it's almost a guarantee. Never say fully a guarantee, but it's pretty much like as close to a guarantee as close to a guarantee can get that the Conservatives are not only going to win the next election, but that they're going to win a majority. I went over the polls in a previous video. 98% likely, according to current poll projections, that the Conservatives will win a majority, and 2% likely that they'll win a minority. So the worst, if at all possible, that the Conservatives do, that'll equal out, and then they might not win a majority. But it's really seeming like they will. And that tension, that animosity is transferring into our politicians, and you see a lot of hostility and a lot of almost cowardice and acceptance of defeat by those that are being defeated, such as the Liberals. Welcome back to another video, everybody. This is going to be a good one. We're going to go over a question period highlight reel. Pierre Poilievre was there. Justin Trudeau was not, which brings me to my next point. Have you seen Justin Trudeau? Have you seen me? If you want this sticker, the link for that is down in the description or the pinned comment below. That's why these are made, folks, because Justin Trudeau does not show up to his job. He's missing. We need them on milk cartons across the country, probably not in schools, because we kind of want like the youth to forget about Trudeau and focus on positive things in the future. So maybe we'll figure one out for schools, but that's not the priority. The priority is finding Justin Trudeau because he's missing. He did not appear to do his job today in the House of Commons, but Pierre Poilievre did, and he did a really good job of putting everybody in their place. So before we get into it, I want you guys to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't yet, turn on post notifications. It does help grow the channel, does help push this video out further so it gets more reach, so more people can actually be aware of what's going on. And now, finally, I will shut up and we'll get into the question period highlight. Hope you enjoy.
Oral questions.
Oral questions. Question honorable, honorable leader of the opposition.
Mr. Speaker, for the first time in 60 years, rent is rising faster than salaries. That's according to the Bank of Montreal. After 8 years of this Prime Minister, rent has doubled, mortgage payments have doubled, and down payments have doubled too. Will the Prime Minister finally watch my documentary? It's an unprecedented, very striking, common sense documentary. And will the Prime Minister come up with a common sense plan to bring down grocery prices and build homes that people can afford and can buy?
Mr. Speaker, it's a shame that the honourable member doesn't put as much energy into generating housing policies as he does to generating housing videos. The reality, Mr. Speaker, is when I actually look
that's a good zinger.
In the video,
I'll let him have it.
It's going to result in fewer homes being constructed than we are already on pace to build. He plans to put the GST back on some home construction. He plans to cut funding for cities who are trying to build more housing, and he plans for Canada to get out of the home building game altogether. Mr. Speaker, necessary to build more homes and not a strategy to cut home funding like the Conservatives would.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, he clearly didn't watch my common sense documentary, which is being widely acclaimed by all. If he had, he would know the facts. Our common sense plan takes the GST off for apartments that are affordable, below average cost. He wants to take it off just for $10 million penthouses. We want to take the bureaucracy out of the picture so home builders can build. He's got a $4 billion fund that, according to the City of Halifax, is funding more bureaucratic gatekeepers. So why won't he watch the documentary, follow the common sense plan to get rid of the taxes and the bureaucracy and build more homes?
There you go, buddy.
The Honourable Minister of Housing.
Mr. Speaker, it's fascinating. For him, it's about how many people are going to watch his Twitter videos. For me, it's about how many people are going to have a roof over their head.
Hear, hear.
The right path forward is going to have Canada make investments in home building, not cuts to home builders. The right investment will reduce taxes on the construction of homes, not put taxes on them. Mr. Speaker, the right path forward will not repeat the mistakes of the past by cutting funding for affordable housing for 30 years, as that honourable member pledges to do. We will make the investments. We will not accept that cuts are the right approach.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
But here's the reality. People don't have roofs over their head. After 8 years of this Prime Minister and his housing minister of photo ops and media puff pieces, the rent has doubled, mortgage payments have doubled, down payments have doubled. In his own home province, in Halifax, they now have 30 homeless encampments. 9 out of 10 young people say they will never be able to afford a home. And what have they done? Create a $4 billion housing accelerator that 2 years later hasn't completed a single solitary house. Why won't they get rid of the bureaucracy and the taxes so that we can bring homes Canadians can afford?
The Honourable Minister of Housing.
Mr. Speaker, the irony when I take criticisms about photo ops from that member is shocking, because he continues to use his opportunities to travel around the country on the government's dime to take pictures in front of projects that our government funded. The reality is the fund that he is talking about has secured agreements that will change the way that cities are built, not just in Halifax, but in Moncton, Kitchener, Kelowna, Calgary, Vaughan, Brampton, Richmond Hill, London, Hamilton, the province of Quebec, and I will continue the more time he gives me.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
You know, all those homes in all those cities that he's talking about, they're all open concept. They have no walls, they have no windows, they have no roofs, they have no basements, no kitchens, no bathrooms. In fact, Mr. Speaker, other than that, they're the best homes you can imagine, and you'll have to imagine them because after 8 years, they still don't exist. So, instead of pouring billions of dollars into local government gatekeepers who block construction, why won't he follow my common sense plan to require cities boost housing construction by 15% a year or lose their money unless they beat the target and get a building bonus? Common sense.
The Honourable Minister of Housing.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member's argument falls apart when you come to understand he ignores the good work that has been done since the National Housing Strategy was adopted in 2017. There are hundreds of thousands of homes that exist today that have been built or retrofitted as a direct result of government supports that have put them in place. Mr. Speaker, when you actually look at what the honourable member's policy will do, it will raise taxes on middle-class home construction. It will cut funding to cities who desperately need the infrastructure so they can build more homes, and he will remove support for affordable housing altogether, which is a cardinal sin we cannot repeat after a 30-year history where we should...
He's the only one that's going to fix this mess.
The Honourable Leader.
But he lost like 1 million people.
Sin. It's time for that member to make a confession that since 2017, when they brought in this program, housing costs have doubled. The rent has doubled. Mortgage payments have doubled. The needed down payment have all doubled. My common sense plan, which is in a 15-minute documentary he can watch between photo ops while he's being chauffeured around, would ensure that cities have to permit 15% more homes in order to keep their funding. It would take taxes off construction, including carbon taxes off of building materials, and it would require CMHC bureaucrats quickly approve financing or lose their bonuses and get fired. This is a common sense plan. Why won't he get working to implement it?
The Honourable Minister of Housing.
I'm fond of the honourable member's soliloquies on biblical passages, Mr. Speaker, somebody who read scripture in church growing up, and if there's one lesson I took, it's that we all have a responsibility to help the vulnerable members of our community. The reality is we have been investing since 2017 to put money in place that's actually going to support people who do not have a roof over their head, to build more affordable housing after 30 years of Liberal and Conservative governments not taking the issue of housing seriously. The honourable member plans to make cuts where we will make investment, and I know which path will put a roof over more of my neighbours' heads.
Years of the Liberal NDP government, they plan on quadrupling their carbon tax scam to crush families, farmers, and First Nations further. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. He refuses to tell his senators to stand down and pass common sense Conservative Bill C-234 to take the tax off our farmers. Even First Nation communities, more than 100, are fed up and taking this government to court over the carbon tax, saying it's disproportionate and an unfair burden to them. When will the Prime Minister take the carbon tax off families, farmers, First Nations, finally?
Hear, hear.
Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and for the fourth or fifth time, I'd like to remind the Conservatives that the only senators that sit in a caucus sit in their Conservative caucus, and the Senate is in fact independent, Mr. Speaker. And I would actually like to raise the fact that the Conservatives have had this really troubling trend of bullying, particularly female senators, whenever they're not getting what they want out of the Senate, and that's a problem, Mr. Speaker. That's a problem for democracy, and they should reconsider.
Says the guy who went into a woman's DMs and told her to F off.
Of not advancing their legislation at their women with.
That's just optics.
The honourable member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
This is coming from the guy that swore at a girl in her DMs. Acts of reconciliation are not worth the cost. A recent Auditor General report is an unfair burden on Indigenous communities, something that Ontario reiterated just last week. And you know what, Mr. Speaker? So is this Liberal NDP government, because they still...
Folks, you got to hit the like button after that one. You got to hit the like button. I called it.
Carbon tax off families.
You got to hit the like button.
Nations, finally.
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, a price on pollution is an important part of addressing the climate.
Oh, man.
It actually promotes innovation and incentives, but let me read you a couple of things here.
I've seen the script beforehand, folks. I've seen the script. I know how it goes.
Use pricing mechanisms. Quote, we will work with the provinces and territories at both the national and state level to develop a trade system for greenhouse gases. Those are the Conservative Party platform from 2008 and 2021. My God, it's the height of hypocrisy in this chamber.
The honourable member for Foothills.
A common-sense Conservative Bill 234 will save farmers close to $1 billion. But this Prime Minister, who is demanding his senators block this bill, is not worth the cost. The Keelstra farm in Okotoks paid $180,000 in carbon taxes this year. When the Prime Minister quadruples that tax, it'll be $480,000 just in carbon taxes. There is no way, when 2 million Canadians are relying on food banks, that we cannot afford to have affordable, nutritious, Canadian-grown food. Will the Prime Minister finally remove the carbon tax from families, farmers, and First Nations?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Mr. Speaker, being a farmer, I fully understand how important it is to take care of the soil and to take care of
I see him, I hear him, and all I think is KFC.
But he does not have a plan for the environment. Quite simply, we're able to make, with our plan, millions of dollars in British Columbia to help farmers innovate, increase their production, and make sure farmers...
Tell me if I'm wrong, folks. Tell me if I'm wrong down in the chat. But that's what I see, and that's what I hear.
The Honourable Member for Foothills.
I agree with the Agriculture Minister. Our plan is definitely not to bankrupt farmers and continue to make food unaffordable. Canadian farmers are struggling under punishing input costs like the carbon tax. In fact, often the carbon tax costs them more than the natural gas they use. But the Bill C-234, a common sense Conservative bill, is the solution. But the Prime Minister is blocking his senators from passing this bill in the Senate. Will the Prime Minister follow his 2001 campaign and pass it forward and let this bill pass the Senate and finally take the carbon tax off farmers, families, and First Nations?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate my colleague's concern, but I think he's fully aware the only party in this House that has any control over senators is the Conservative Party of Canada. We do not have senators in our party. And there was some talk of harassment in the Senate. We're not involved in harassment. What we want to do as a government is make sure we make farmers innovate, produce more product, and be more profitable. We have and will continue to do that, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of NDP Liberal borrowing and spending, this Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. 90% of Canadian mortgages up for renewal in the next 2 years are at fixed interest rates of about 3%. Today, there are 3 million Canadians about to head to renew their mortgages, and they're facing rates of up to 7%. The Bank of Canada Governor has confirmed that excessive government borrowing and spending is driving these rate hikes. So when will the Prime Minister end the inflationary spending, balance the budget to lower rates so that Canadians can afford to eat, heat, and keep their homes?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Yeah, it's going to be hard when the mortgage renewals come out.
Mr. Speaker, I am I'm glad that the member
I think so many people are
going to
lose
about mortgage renewals because it gives me an opportunity to be sure that all Canadians know about the Canadian Mortgage Charter, which we published in the Fall Economic Statement a couple of weeks ago. The Canadian Mortgage Charter gives Canadians who are facing a mortgage renewal a clear sense of what they have the right to ask their bank to do in terms of tailored support. It's providing Canadians with relief right now, and I urge everyone to take a look.
The honourable member for Parry Sound, Muskoka.
Well, I can bet that their mortgage charter and any other photo ops and PR stunts they do are about as useful as monopoly money, but more Liberal vanity projects and PR campaigns clearly aren't going to fix the fiscal mess that this Liberal NDP government has caused over the last 8 years. Canadians headed to renew their mortgages are facing double the payments. And they're about to find out that this Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. So when? I ask when? When will the NDP Liberal government stop the inflationary spending, balance the budget, lower rates, so that Canadians can afford to keep their homes?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, as I think everyone in this House knows, Canada has a AAA rating and the lowest debt and deficit in the G7. It is also true, Mr. Speaker, that our government invested in Canadians during COVID, and we were proud to do so. We supported 9 million Canadians with CERB. We supported more than 5 million Canadian jobs with the wage subsidy, and we supported 900,000 Canadian businesses with CEBA loans. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Official Opposition called those big, fat government programs. I call those life rafts for Canadians when they needed them the most.
The Honourable Member for Costa Bay Central Notre Dame.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this NDP-backed Liberal Prime Minister, the cost of homes and rent has doubled. Mr. Speaker, it's so bad in St. John's that one man ignored his bail hearing so that he could be sent to jail instead of spending a cold, wet, homeless winter on the streets. When petty criminals choose dilapidated jail cells like those at Her Majesty's Penitentiary over homelessness, it's clear that this Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. So will the Prime Minister commit to ending the homeless crisis, or does he take pleasure in seeing people choose jail over homelessness?
Bit of a struggle to get it out, but nonetheless
I don't
effective.
think any member of this House of any party takes any pleasure in seeing anyone in this country live on the street, and it would be a shame if the honourable member were suggesting that.
I think the Liberals do actually take pleasure in that.
In the city of St. John's, which he referenced in his question, I would point him to the recent exchange we had with the Mayor of St. John's, where we encouraged them to increase their housing ambition so they could actually provide homes for more people and reduce the cost of rent. The funding that we hope to provide to the city of St. John's, should they meet the moment, comes through a program that he is personally committing to oppose. The Conservatives believe the solution to the housing crisis is to spend less money on housing, and I fundamentally disagree.
The Honourable Member for Kelowna, Lake Country.
Well, Mr. Speaker, inflation is caused by the Prime Minister's deficit spending. The Bank of Montreal's chief economist explained that inflation is the new villain, fueling the fires of Canada's housing hell. Rents have skyrocketed 8.2% year over year, the fastest pace since 1983. Rents are up, mortgages are up, inflation's up, interest rates are up. This Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. After 8 years, when will this NDP Liberal government stop their deficit spending so people can keep a roof over their head? Thank you.
Yeah.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let's talk about facts and reality. The reality is Canada has the lowest deficit.
Peak Liberal words. The reality is
the entire G7. The reality is, when you listen to the objective economists whose job is to judge our fiscal position, the ratings agencies, we have a AAA rating. And you know what, Mr. Speaker? We made the necessary investments to support Canadians. That's by 1.1 million more jobs in Canada than before COVID, while our economy is more than 104% bigger than it was before COVID, Mr. Speaker.